Today's day and age, electrical tools are important. You're going to need to test electrical all the time for many different things. You're going to need simple tools like this, more advanced tools. I'm going to show you some great tools that you can get and some great tools that you can use in the meantime. Automotive here, guys, and today I'm going to talk about electrical tools, essentials and must-haves, and some wants, some that can be higher up on the list. They're going to cost more. It's going to make your life a lot easier. Before we get started, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell. You get notified of all my future content, which you definitely don't want to miss. All right, let's jump right in. All right, first and foremost, some of these tools will be linked down below, and if you use the link down below, it does help the channel move forward, get new tools, equipment, things like that. So let's get started. The first thing that you're going to need right off the bat, you're always going to need a multimeter. Now, I was taught in school 20 years ago that you are only as good as your test equipment. If you can't trust your equipment, then you can't trust your diagnostics. So you got to make sure that your meter is good. So let's say you have, this is a snap-on meter. Okay, I started with a $100 meter from the school store, and it did everything I needed to do, and I used it for probably 15 years. Worked fine, nothing wrong with it. Now, most meters like this, you don't have to calibrate them. So let's say you're testing ohms. You can just turn it to ohms and start testing. Here's the problem with using a regular meter like this and just testing ohms is, let's say that there is a ohms difference in your meter, your leads, then your results are going to be incorrect. Let's say between one end of your lead and all the way around to the other, there's 5 ohms of resistance. You're testing an injector and the resistance spec is 18. You've got 22. Well, you have 5 ohms of resistance in your leads, so that adds 5 ohms of resistance to what you're testing. It appears that it's out of spec. You're going to sell an injector, it's not going to be the problem. It was your equipment. Now, if you have a fancier electrical device, you have a snap-on scanner with a scope on it, a lot of times it will make you calibrate the leads. And then it comes up with a 0 reading you can test. Now it's correct. So the multimeter is important, but when you test ohms, you want to just double check and make sure that you have no ohms so you know what to start with. So that's the first tool. Now this is a tool that many people probably have. They don't use it very often, and that's a test light. Now, why don't people use test lights? Well, here's why. Because everybody goes out and buys a power probe. Now, why do you want a power probe or a tool like this? Well, power probes are good. It's got, right here, it tells you the voltage. This one can tell you the amperage. It can tell you resistance, all kinds of stuff. It does quite a bit. The problem with this is it's not an accurate multimeter. But what's good about this is you can use this, you can apply power, you can apply ground. So you can turn on a solenoid, turn on a switch, turn on a cooling fan to see if it operates. But using this as a multimeter is not a good choice. Now, back in the day, the power probe was a power and ground. That was it. It told you if you had power or ground, you could apply power and ground. That was it. Then they came out with the Power Probe 3, which read voltage on the screen. It was awesome because back in the day, you would be checking a fuel pump. Check it. Okay, I got power. Now, got to break out my multimeter and see if I really have 12.6 volts. Oh, I only have 8.1. It's not going to operate. The connector's burned up top. That's the problem. Okay, so with the Power Probe, it was great because back in the day, we didn't know that these weren't super accurate, but it was great because you could check it. You had power, you had 12.5 volts, good, it needed a fuel pump. So that was a good start, but a test light is good because it takes more for this to show power than it does a Power Probe. So that's why a test light should be in your toolbox. You're gonna need leads. Now, I recommend you get a good set of leads that have a disconnectable end like this. So these are just banana jacks right here. This is the most common kind. It's what you're gonna have. So what's good about this though is you can put a back probe pin. You can get kits that have back probe pins that have regular leads like this, or you can get an alligator clip for a ground, whatever. So these are good. You can get these. Now I will link a lot of this stuff down below. Now a good set of back probe pins is important because you want to be able to back probe. So with electrical, sometimes you can have a component that's not working. As soon as you disconnect it, it will start working again. So you want to test it without disconnecting it. AC compressor clutches are very common for this. It won't work. As soon as you disconnect that relay or the connector and then plug it back in, it will start working. Now you got to wait for it to fail again. So a back probe pin is great. Back probe, turn on the AC, you got power, it's got a bad clutch. Or a relay. If it turns on and turns off with the relay disconnected, it's the relay. But a good set of leads is important. Now here's another lead set that's important to have, and that is a set that you can connect each other to. So sometimes, let's say you're testing at the front of the vehicle and you're all the way at the back. You got a really far way to test. Well, back in the day, we would just push the one lead like this into this lead and then connect multiple leads together. The only problem with that is you're not getting a good connection. So this type of lead is good. So this is another lead, just a regular banana jack, but it comes with these. Now what these are good for is I can take this and I can plug it in like that, and I can plug it into this lead, and now I have two sets of leads. Now I can go from ground to the meter. I can stretch it out really far, and I'm gonna have a good ground. Now, another good lead to have is what's called a bed of nails. Now, a bed of nails it's gonna be really hard to see, but it is a whole bunch of little tiny itty bitty needles. And so when you put the wire in here and you close this, it pushes down. It makes a whole bunch of little tiny holes in the wire. It makes connection to the wires, but it doesn't make a giant hole in the wiring. So this is a good tool to have. There's a tool called the Phil's probes, and it's a really long probe. And you put the wire in there and you screw it down. And essentially it does the same thing. It's got a whole bunch of little nails, I believe. I don't have any. They're on back order. I got my name on the list to get one. But anyways, so power probes are good. Back to the power probe. These are good to have, but I will give you one word of caution with a power probe. Make sure you know what you're hooked into before you go and start toggling power and ground. When I first got a power probe, my boss came and said, whoa, 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 whoa. Man, please be careful, because I already had a tech who used this, probed the wrong circuit, applied power, and popped an ECM. He let the smoke out of the box. Well, once you let the smoke out of the box, you can't put it back in. You fry a computer, it's done. Got to get a new one. Back then, they weren't that expensive. Nowadays, computers are very expensive, hard to come by in some situations. Now let's talk about the data link connector. So the data link connector is the little OBD under the dash that you plug your scan tool in. It looks similar to that. So when you're testing for power, let's say you need to find out if it's got power, pin 16. Does it have power? Well, you got to be real careful when you just start shoving needles in there, because those pins are they have a certain bit of tightness to them. And when you shove stuff in there, they open up. And then when they open up and then you plug something in, it doesn't have good connection. Doesn't work right. So you want to get what's called a breakout box. So a breakout box is nice. You plug this end into the OBD end. And let's say you want to have a scanner plugged in. You can plug in your scanner here. Now there's many different brands of breakout boxes. This just happens to be the power probe version. We have another one up front. And what happens when you plug this in, it lights up, it tells you your voltage, and it tells you all the different pins, and it tells you if you have power, ground, and you can test it. It's got a little port in there to test to see what the power is. Super important to have a breakout box. It's gonna save you, and I could tell you a long time ago, I was testing ABS, and before I had all this fancy equipment, I was just shoving test leads into a connector. I spent hours trying to diagnose an ABS problem that turned out to be something I created. It was all because I shoved a connector in there, or a wiring in there, that was too big. Now that leads me to forward probes. Now a forward probe is a lead that you can plug in to a connector. So let's say the connector is a female and the other end is a male. Your scan tool is a male, right? So you plug it in, and it has a bit of tightness, so as you slide it in, it gets good connection. So what these are called, these are forward probes. So this is a spade type forward probe. You can see there's different thicknesses, different widths. And so you can slide this, if you get the correct one, you can slide this into the connector, have a good connection. It doesn't open it up, doesn't do any damage. And it makes, and the other end is for your is for your leads. So you plug it in, you have a good connection. Now this is a set right here. Now this comes with what's called a Devo meter, and I will link this stuff down below. This comes in a master set from the Devo meter, and this is a good tool to have, the Devo meter. Otherwise, I have these from another scope that I got, but the other thing that you want to get is little tiny back probe pins. Now these are from Snap-on, and I bought these because they look like they were going to come in handy. These are very, very, very tiny back probe pins. Now sometimes the wiring is so small that you need something very, very tiny to test. So I can tell you that I've had a few times where if I didn't have these, I couldn't test, because even my normal back probe pin couldn't even touch the front of inside the connector to see if I had proper power and ground. Next up, we're going to talk about parasitic draws. So a parasitic draw is when you turn the key off and lock the doors and the vehicle is consuming electricity. It's consuming battery power. So you'll have somebody that says, hey, look, my vehicle is dead the next morning. It's dead over the weekend. It's dead in a few hours. Depending on the amount of draw will tell you how fast the battery is going to be depleted. You're going to need to test for that. So back in the day, we used to disconnect the battery, the positive battery terminal. We would clamp one end of this to the battery itself, put this to the battery wiring. So this would be in between the battery and the wiring for the positive. And it would light this up. And we would look at how bright the bulb was, and how bright the bulb was would tell you how much of a draw you had. So you would start pulling fuses until that light bulb went out. This is an ineffective way to do it. And it took a long time, and it didn't always work, and it bit you in the butt. So there are lots of tools to diagnose low parasitic draws. One way you can get a low amp probe like this. This is what I used in the past, and I would get this and I would hook up to a scope. Got to have a meter to plug that into to see if it's drawing. Another way to do it, this is called a low amp probe, and it's just a standalone low amp probe, and I think this is around a little over $100, I believe. So all you do is you turn this on and you put this around your negative battery terminal, battery cable. You have one or two, whatever, you check it, you put it around it, and it will give you a reading. So 0.050 amps is the highest allowable amp draw. So if you have a 0.050, you have a very small amp draw. If it goes above that, you have an amp draw that will kill the battery over time. So you can use this and you can check for that. This is very simple, very easy to do, and very inexpensive. And it actually gives you a reading. You know exactly what it is. So from here, you can start pulling fuses till this reading goes away. Only problem with doing that is when you pull fuses, things wake up. You turn the key off, you lock the car, you check your draw, you've got a certain draw. Let's say you pull a fuse, the meter doesn't change, you plug it back in, now everything woke back up. Now you gotta wait. Gonna get inaccurate readings. So that leads me to other ways to find parasitic draw, find the problem. This tells you if you have one. Other ways, now you gotta find the problem. How are you gonna find the problem? Well, one way is to disconnect fuses, right? Wait for it to go out. In effect, that's not a good way to do it. Other way is you take your meter and you get your leads and you put it on voltage, and you take two leads and you go across your fuse. And you check for the voltage drop across the fuse. So let's say you go across and you have 0.00 or 0.01, you have no amp draw. Well, PowerProbe has a chart on their website. You go get it, you can print it out, I have it somewhere, and you open it up, and let's say you have a 10 amp mini fuse, and you go down, and let's say you have 2.3 millivolts of draw, right? Random number, and you go and you look up that fuse rating and you go 2.3 millivolts, and it will tell you what your amp draw is based on that reading. Now, that is fine, it works great. There's nothing wrong with that. It just takes a little bit longer because now you got to go and you got to check it, you got to go to the chart, you got to see. Now, PowerProbe makes some tools to make things a little bit easier. Now they have what's called a fuse monitor. So this isn't cheap, and it's another extra tool you got to buy. So what does this tool do? This tool, you set it up and you say, I'm going to check a 10 amp mini fuse, and you test across the terminals of the fuse. This does the math for you. It tells you what the amp draw is on that fuse. You go through 0, 0, 0, 0. 3.1. Okay, now I got to draw. This is the fuse. Oh, look at that. It's the radio fuse. Pull the radio out, disconnect the radio. Boom. Draw goes away. That is how you can find parasitic draws. Now, another way is, now again, this is a luxury tool. It costs a little more, and it's another tool you got to have. Probably the cheapest way, another way, is to use a power probe draw monitor. Now, this is fantastic. You start the car, plug this in, turn the key off, lock it. There's this whole way to do this. And then this reads the draw through your OBD2 connector. Now, this only works on vehicles that have OBD2 connectors. So 95 and older, you're not going to use it. However, this will tell you your draw. Start disconnecting stuff, whatever. You know if you have a draw. Now, this doesn't always work. I had a ProMaster that this told me I had a certain draw, and it was telling me it was on a certain circuit, and that circuit turned out to be inside the dash. And before I went and tore the dash apart to find the draw that I thought I had on that circuit, because I used the draw monitor, then I used this, and that told me I had a draw on a certain circuit. I went and double checked with this and found that the draw was not on that circuit. It was giving me an incorrect reading. But not all tools are great for everything. Everything has a drawback. So now let's talk about load testing a wire. So let's say you have a light bulb that won't turn on. It could be something small, an interior light, it could be a turn signal light, it could be a headlight, it doesn't matter what it is. So it needs power and ground and current to operate that light bulb. Now, light bulbs take more current than something small and minor. They take a lot more output, right? So you turn on your garden hose, and if the water just barely trickles out, it's not going to water the grass. But if you put a nozzle on there and you apply and you have enough, so let's say you have a garden hose and it has only a little bit of water in it. It's not going to do anything coming out of the end of the hose. You got to fix that water supply so you have a full stream of water to do the proper job. So current is the flow of electricity. So let's say you have a wire, and in that wire, let's say there's 10 strands of wire, or 15 or 20, it doesn't matter. And all of them are corroded through except for one. One little bitty tiny strand of wire has a connection. When you check one end and the other end and you do an ohm test, it's going to show you that you have, let's say, 0.1 ohms of resistance. You have no resistance, it's good. Now you get your power probe and you check with your power probe and you check and you got ground. Go to the other end of that single strand of wire and you have power. Should work. So you sell a bulb and you put a bulb in, doesn't work. Doesn't work because there's not enough current to operate the light bulb. It takes a lot more electricity. So now we got to find out why we have that problem. So this is why a test light is better, because when you touch the end with a test light, the light bulb's going to just barely light up. It's not going to light up much because there's not much power to light it up. And then you know, oh wait, hang on, I don't have enough power to light this light bulb. So now how can you find that problem? Well, there are several ways to do it. One way is a tool that I just bought recently. Haven't even actually used it yet, and that's called a Load Pro. And this is from AES. It's a Load Pro, and you load the wire and it tells you what the resistance is. Got to be careful with this stuff because it's not meant for all circuits, and if you test the wrong circuit, then you can fry computers and you can do damage. Another way to do it is probably the cheapest way. You can take, there will be flow charts for things that will tell you to put a halogen headlamp bulb in between a circuit. So you've got a circuit and it needs power and ground, or it has power and it has ground, and you hook a headlight bulb around that loop there. And if the light bulb lights up, then you know it has enough current to run. Another way, you can make your own little bulb. This is not a bulb that pulls very much amperage, so it's not a very good tester, but put like this, you got a fuse and a bulb. That's a cheap way to do it. You also have to worry about this bulb getting hot. Some people do that with headlight bulbs, but then they're setting it on carpet, and when you turn it on, that headlight bulb turns on, it gets hot, and it melts the carpet. It could start a fire. Well, Check Engine Chuck, he came out with probably the best way to do it, the cheapest way to do it, because I don't think this is very much. And it's a serviceable light bulb in here. It's a headlight bulb, and you just have two leads. So let's say you got an AC compressor clutch. AC is another one. your clutch cannot have enough current, and you can sell an AC compressor and it won't work because it doesn't have enough current to run. So all you do is put one of this lead to ground, put the other lead to your compressor clutch circuit, and turn it on. And if the light bulb lights up bright, then you know you have enough current, you know your wiring is good. Back to the back probing. Now let's say you want to back probe something that's way down low. It's an AC compressor on a Honda, and you don't really want to go and take a whole bunch of stuff apart. You don't want to go look up wiring diagrams to access this compressor clutch circuit. So how are you going to get down there? Well, what I always did was I always took my lead like this, and I would tape it with electrical tape. I'd have a 90-degree probe, and I would tape it to an extension, and I would electrical tape it, and then I would try to push it in. Problem is, it's taped, so it doesn't have a great connection. So you're trying to push it in, and it's not really going in. And back probing wires isn't always the easiest. So what I found was I put a video asking people for help, and had people tell me about this guy here. You can get this on Amazon really cheap. I will link a lot of this stuff down below. And so you take this and you can get 2 sets. I'm gonna get 1 more set. But anyways, this is long enough. Now you put your back probe pin right here, plug your lead in, and now you can back probe the compressor clutch. You got power, it needs compressor. Super, super easy diag. It takes 5 minutes to do that. No looking up wiring diagrams, none of that stuff. So that's one way to access wiring. Now, other things that you can get along the way, cheap things, checking trailer wiring. You can check it real easy by just checking the pins at the back. You go and you turn on the brake pedal, you check the pin, which pin is which. You don't really know, it doesn't always stay. Sometimes it's covered in mud. You can go get yourself a trailer connector. This is just one. This lights up showing you got brake, you got turn, you got both. Super easy, but it's another tool that you have to buy to do testing when you actually could just test it with this or this. So this is a matter of how you can test things cheaper and how you can do it with a little more ease. It's gonna cost a little bit more to do it. Now, all right, so now another thing that you're gonna need to do is you're gonna need to learn how to scope electrical connector, electrical signals. So let's say you're not just looking for power and ground, you're looking for an on-off. You're checking a purge valve, and it is a duty cycle, so it's on-off, 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 and it's not how much it's on. It's not being on and off. It's the percentage of on and off time that it has. So to be able to test that, you need a scope because it's going to go on, off, on, off. So electrical signal is going to look like this. So how are you going to test for that? Well, to be able to test for that signal, to be able to test an oxygen sensor, things like that, where the voltage is varying, you're gonna need a scope. And this is a 1-channel scope. Now this is probably your cheapest, best option. And the reason is because if you never used a scope, you have to set up the on-off time, you have to set up the voltage, you have to set up what kind of electrical signal it is. When you have this is called a U-scope. When you have a U-scope, it's a 1-channel scope. This will set itself up. So before you turn it on, you back probe your injector connector and you go to ground and you turn this and you start the car. You turn this on and it's automatically going to set up based on the electrical signal that it appears that you're testing. Now it could be wrong and you may have to go in there and test it, but this is a 1-channel scope. So you want to test a crank sensor to see if you have a crank signal. Maybe you're not looking to check it with number 1 or the cam sensor. You just want to see if the crank sensor is reading. Great tool. Looking at an oxygen sensor, great tool. But let's say you need to look at actual and desired, or you want to look at a crank signal and you want to test it to a cam signal. You can't do that if you can't test more than 1 channel. This only tests 1. Now, how are you going to do that? Well, there are several ways. There's a scope I'll link down below. It costs about $1,000. It's a pretty good scope. The only problem with it is it's 100% you have to learn how to set it up. I actually got it, didn't like it because it was very difficult to learn how to set it up because I didn't grow up in this industry setting up scopes. I always use Snap-on scopes, Snap-on Vantages, things like that auto set themselves up. Never learned how to do it. So I recently got this Auto Ultra S2. This is a 4-channel scope. One of the reasons that I wanted to get this was because it was a 4-channel scope. It also will kind of auto set itself up based on what you're testing. You can hit auto, does the same thing. This is a big screen. You can really check a lot of stuff. Now, the other thing that you can do is you can look at actual and desired. You can look at two electrical signals, compare them to each other. You can put them over each other. You can do a lot of stuff. So that's why I like this. Now, this is a scan tool as well, so this is really expensive, about $6,000, and it's the first scan tool I ever bought, and I love it. It's awesome. And one day down the road, this is going to be something that you're going to want to get, or you can get a picoscope. A picoscope is the best electrical scope you can get. You will need a laptop, then you have to buy a kit from Pico. It comes with a scope brain or whatever that you plug in, and everything's going to plug into that, and you can do a ton of stuff with it. I don't do enough scoping for a picoscope, so this is going to do the job. Now, another tool that you're going to want with your scope is you're going to want a low amp probe or a high amp probe. Now, you ever have that misfire and it's underneath the plenum and you suspect it's an ignition coil, but you can't test that ignition coil because you can't get to it. And to get to it, the engine doesn't run, you can't test it. All you can do is take the plenum off, remove the plug, look at the plug, say, yeah, it looks like a plug. Maybe take that coil and you replace it and you cross your fingers, or you can swap it to the front, where if it's misfiring, now it's in the front. The problem is you had to take that plenum off to find it. You can do, one of the reasons I wanted to buy this scope is you can get a low amp probe and you can get this. And so one way to test for that is you get a kit like this. This is from AES Specialties, Electronic Specialties, and it comes with a fused input here, and you got these different right here like this. And what this is these are for the different kinds of fuses. So let's say you want to plug this in like this, and you have a 20 amp fuse. You got a 20 amp fuse here. You plug this and you take your fuse out. You put this in, it's fused, right? Now you got a loop here. You put your low amp probe here, and it's gonna check the amp probe. So let's say the ignition coils all operate on the same fuse. You can, here's an example of how this works. I watched a guy in 10 minutes walk out to a car that had no misfire data, but it had a misfire code. It was misfiring. He walked up, and within 10 minutes, he looked up the information, removed the fuse, put this on, hooked up to it, set up his scope, started the car, looked at the scope and said, this is Cody's Auto Diagnostics. He said, I have one bad coil, 2 aftermarket coils, the rest are good. He knew that all by looking at his scope in 10 minutes, everything start to finish. That's looking up the diagrams and all he did was hook up here, and then he back probed into a coil to reference a signal. I did this as soon as I got this set up, looked at an Explorer, and I was able to tell the service advisor 100% the coil that was underneath the plenum was the problem. It needs a coil, and I was right. Scoped it before, scoped it after. I have a video on it on how to do it. It's actually really cool. The next thing is called relative compression. Have you ever been in a vehicle that doesn't start, and when you're cranking it over, it cranks over and it goes crank, 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 crank. So every time that cylinder hits, it's a low cylinder, you have low compression. I had a Jeep last week that came in that had a misfire. It had a misfire code for 2 cylinders. When I started it, I could hear low compression. It was not misfiring on the scan tool. So I got a high amp clamp because I wanted to do this, hooked this around the battery, started it or cranked it over by removing the fuses, cranked it over, referenced a cylinder, pulled up the firing order, and I could see that the number 4 cylinder had a low cylinder by using this. Well, guess what? 2 and 3 had misfire codes and not 4. So I would have addressed a misfire on 2 and 3, and when I got done, it would have still had low compression on cylinder 4. So that's why you're going to want this. Also checking starter draw, things like that. So a couple other tools that you can get. You can get this. This is called a Devo meter. And what this does is you have battery power that hooks up to one side and you hook up to a circuit on the other side. And this is a more accurate multimeter type deal. It loads the circuit. It will tell you if you have continuity or not. If you've got a problem with that is if you really don't understand what you're testing, it's very difficult to use. So I've gotten some help and I've been able to use it. Now another tool that's super awesome is from AES Wave, and that is called the U-Activate. Now some of these tools are very expensive. This one's about 300 bucks. So what this does is that you've got this here and you've got different connectors for your different relays, and you plug into your relay connector. You've got a loop for your amp clamp. You've got all the spots to plug in. to test for your electrical. You can operate the relay with the button, and it's all very simple to use, and it makes testing the relay very easy. But like I said, this tool is like 300 bucks. Do you need this tool? Absolutely not. Can you get by without it? Yes, but it makes things a lot more difficult if you don't have these tools. A lot of this stuff you can get by without. A lot of this stuff you can guess and hope and pray. And then one day you're going to want all of this stuff, because you never know when you're going to need one of these tools to get the job done correctly. Drop a comment down below and let me know some of these tools, if you like them, if you don't like them, or if they're on your bucket list. Also, a lot of these tools will be linked down below. Thank you for any help you give the channel. I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.